welcome back to the hills and another edition of our technique section. And this issue we're going to be looking at something that a lot of people focus on, and a lot of people it's their primary goal in riding, and that's how to carry more speed. There's obviously many elements to that process and a few things we can do and a few shortcuts we can take to make sure we get faster quicker. Our skills development model is separated into 3 tiers of skills: the personal, you and your equipment; the psychological, those things that affect the way we think and have a knock-on effect to our physical skill set; and then we've got all 8 physical skills that we can employ. In the personal element, there's two-part components to the personal tier: you and your equipment. So let's have a quick look at that equipment side of things, because no doubt that is going to affect our overall performance to a degree or a larger degree, depending on how badly it's set up. Clearly, having the right tool for the job is going to help. So depending on the terrain we're riding, if we're lucky enough to have a range of bikes that are disposable, we probably want to match the bike to the terrain to a degree. Now that's not always going to be possible, but what we can do is make some adaptations to our bike in terms of how we set up the one bike we've got to cope with different elements. Things like tyre pressure are worth considering. Different conditions require a slightly different setup in terms of tyre, but generally speaking, rule of thumb, a little bit of giving that tyre is going to help stop the bike from stalling as it engages with things, offer up some grip and traction when we need it in corners, etc., and just generally maintain a nice smooth rolling speed rather than being too soft and pinching or dragging or being too hard and pinging off roots and rocks as we ride and pushing energy through the bike that's going to ultimately bounce us around. Secondly, we've got our suspension set up. Now, the more expensive your bike and the more you spend on your shock, the more adjustments there are going to be. I would have thought probably one of the things we overlook the most is tweaking our suspension for different conditions. For some people, it's all a bit of a mystery. But to keep it simple, we've got 2 main sides of things. We've got the compression and the rebound. The compression, how easily it bends, how much weight it takes, how much force it takes to start softening, and the rebound, how quickly it springs back. A modern shock might have 3 different settings on that compression that we can kind of quickly flick between: climb, descend, and trail, with 3 different settings of softness. The big one here really in terms of speed control, in terms of managing speed and achieving high speeds, is getting that rebound right. Too soft and the suspension is going to pack down, too fast and it's going to bounce us around too much, in real layman's terms. If you've never messed around with suspension, just a quick twist of the rebound here. Your rebound will have a number of different settings, a number of different clicks you can wind through. Now if you've never played with it before and you've got no idea how far it goes in either direction, swish it around all the way to one end and then click through, counting the clicks. There might be 10 or 12 clicks through that setting. Once we've established how many clicks there are, we're going to wind back to the midpoint, and that gives us a nice baseline to start from. From there we might play around with our bike on a little section, see how it feels, adjust a click or 2, ride again, feel how it feels. If we want we've got lots of small bumps and inputs, we'll probably want a faster rebound. If we've got bigger hits, we probably want a slightly slower rebound. We don't want to be catapulted around. So play around with your suspension, set it up. You can on the compression side of things, the manufacturers' websites will all have guidelines as to how much air you need in a particular shock for the rider weight, and it can vary enormously depending on where the suspension is set up and the type of shock you're running. So revert to Google search or other search engine search and have a look through at the ideal amount of air we need in the shock if we're running an air, or the spring rate depending on what we're riding. The other considerations in terms of setup are cockpit length and saddle height. With saddle height, obviously if we're pedaling nice flats, long flat sections, we want a good efficient pedaling position with a higher saddle height. The more technical the terrain gets, perhaps the lower we want the saddle for a bit more room between us and the bike so we can let the bike move around more freely below us. Back in the day that meant stopping and starting, or getting used to riding with the saddle a bit too high for the downhills or a bit too low for the uphills, and having just to swallow that pill depending on which one we opted for. Modern bikes, a lot of modern bikes, the old dropper post is taking that problem out of the equation, and we can go up and down as we ride, and on any given trail the saddle height might change numerous times as we ride along it. But if your saddle's too low on the long flat sections, the quads are going to get blown up, we're not going to have a good efficient pedal position, pedaling action, and if the saddle's too high for the more technical, then the old saddle's going to bounce around below us and is easily going to push us around a bit too much. Again, with cockpit length, we can't adjust that as we ride by any means, and each bike's setup, depending on what it's actually geared up for, is going to have a slightly different geometry. Steeper head angle or a slacker head angle, depending if we're more cross country or more trail or enduro or downhill orientated. And again, there's not much we can do about that once we're out on the trail, but again, matching your bike to the terrain is going to be useful for carrying speed. What we can adjust is that lever position, and a little raise of the lever encourages a little bit more of a dropped wrist. Remembering opening up the heels and the wrists, the levers there is going to set us up to carry more speed. And we'll look at that when it comes to body position in the physical elements. So have a play around with your setup, understand the different geometries of different bikes, what you need for what's the terrain you're riding, have a think about tire pressure and compound, have a think about saddle height and cockpit length and lever position, and all of those are going to help us get the right machine and the right tool for the job.